And we're back, and I have with me three different folks who are running for District 4 City Council. From my immediate, well, I don't know if I'm left or right at this point because we're kind of turned around for the videotaping. But immediately beside me, I have Amelia Parker, and then to her right, which is more clear, Lauren Rider and Harry Tindell. And so I'll be asking questions this morning, and if you all could just give your best answer. I've told them they have approximately 7 seconds per answer, so that should work. I think that, what needs to happen in Knoxville in the next 20 years, 7 seconds, go. Actually, we're going to try to limit our answers a little bit just to kind of get through a lot of topics because there are so many topics to answer. Lauren and Amelia, if you probably ought to use your name extra when you start talking because on the radio, people can't tell you apart. You two female voices, maybe.
Just two girls.
I don't know. Maybe Harry, if your voice is high, you should say, I'm Harry. I don't know. So, but yeah, just for the sake of the audience, just so they're sure who's saying what, I would hate for one of you to get elected because the other one's answer was so good. That would be, I would feel forever guilty about that in the history of Knoxville. Let's just start with just a general question. Just tell the listeners a little bit about your relevant background for the job of City Council, how you've contributed to the city prior to the campaign, and what made you decide to run for office. And since you're handy, Amelia, I'm going to start with you. We'll take turns who starts the various questions.
Sure, great. Thanks so much for having us.
Happy to have you.
I grew up in Knoxville and graduated from the University of Tennessee, and then went on to law school where I received not only my law degree but my Master of Laws, so 2 law degrees, and then applied that legal background on a grassroots level. So my focus over the past, almost 20 years now has been working in the community to advocate for certain policies, develop our own policies that we, work with policymakers to introduce, and to develop our own budgets and to look at, how cities are run, what we need as a community, and how we go about making that happen. So that's a little bit about my background and what I feel like is relevant.
And that was so concise. You were a
I'm
model.
working on
you were
it.
a
I'm
model
trying.
interviewee. All right, Lauren, pressure's on.
All right. Well, I have kind of a diverse background. I'm a librarian for one thing. I've worked in hospital libraries doing research, as well as I now work at Pellissippi State Community College with the Tennessee Promise students, a lot of those. And then I moved here 12 years ago and really got involved in the neighborhoods. We were in kind of an area with a lot of blighted and vacant properties that were getting revitalized, and so became involved in that, did a variety of things, including traffic calming issues where people want to feel safer in their homes and be able to walk outside with their kids due to cars going too fast up residential streets. So anyway, I kind of helped be involved in some of the revitalization in North Knoxville so that we had properties the city was going to demolish, and was able to work with neighbors to get those rehabbed. And then from there, I helped organize and collaborate with businesses and neighborhoods to look at some of the incoming revitalization along the corridors in North Knoxville. So those are the things I've done to prepare for running for council, which have involved zoning experience as well as building, which is a lot of what the city does, is issue permits for things that are going on and coming into the area. And a lot of people in the community have asked me to run for about 10 years now, so I feel prepared and I'm ready to hit the ground running. And in addition to that, I also served 7 years on Neighborhood Advisory Council, so I have a lot of experience working on and giving input to different policy with various departments and council already at the city.
Very good. Harry Tindell.
I think, to me, the greatest asset I think I can bring to the citizens of Knoxville and serving them on the city council is that I was born here. I've lived here. I've worked here. I went to school here right at UT. I went to local schools. I know the community. I've seen it develop. I remember when there wasn't a World's Fair park. I remember, when Gay Street and downtown were not what they are today. As you see things develop, you sort of have a feel for what Knoxville wants, what it does well, and also you see the challenges and the opportunities in all directions around town as to how we take it to the next level. And that's what I'm really excited about, is working with community groups as well as businesses and other governmental agencies to bring together vision for where we need to go next. And with term limits, we're going to get a brand new city council. We're going to get 5 new members, a majority this election, and the next 4, and the mayor in 2 years. And so with that, the new council it's like a relay race where the new council is going to accept the baton, from the old council, and the new council will have to set their priorities for the future of Knoxville. And I'm excited about that. I'm interested in that, and I believe I have the experience to help us get to that next level.
Very good. So I started this question when I started these interviews. I would always say, "Your district is shaped in an odd fashion," blah blah blah. And then as I had the interviews week after week, I started realizing they're all weird.
Yeah.
They're all just really strange, and I don't know if they could have been done any better. That's not a critique; it's just an acknowledgement. So you guys, you represent Holston Hills, right? And then it goes all the way across kind of northeast Knoxville, that kind of a swath, all the way to Broadway. I got that correct?
But then also some on the other side of Broadway.
A little on the other side of Broadway. So it's
to the top and the bottom.
It's quite as they all are, I guess, it's quite a diverse area. If you start talking about what one of those areas might need or what might be an issue, it might be different. But just as best you can, and we'll start with Lauren this time, as best you can, talk about what you think the biggest issue, or if you want to do two, you could do two. What really is a big issue for this area that needs to be addressed in this next few years?
Well, in our areas, we have a push of development going along Broadway and Central. Central, actually, parts of it are in the district, the lower part. Part of it's in the 5th district. And then we also have some pushes for development along Asheville Highway and Magnolia. There's some projects that are getting started out on the far end of Asheville Highway. Then we also have people really clamoring to see some development and something happen at the East Mall. So those are all rolled together with housing needs. We're looking to see what kind of development developers are going to come forward and what price levels of housing are going to go into these areas and how that's going to impact the neighborhoods around. But also the traffic issues. When you look at Fountain City and you talk to those neighbors up there, they're really concerned about traffic. So what we have to look at from a long-term perspective is how are things going to develop? How is it going to impact our neighborhoods? How is it going to tie us together? And how are we going to address the traffic issues? So we've got to look at transportation and roads and also density of housing and the needs that we have for both workforce, low income, and our middle class families that are moving into the area.
Okay, we'll dig some more into some of those in a minute. Here.
I describe the 4th District as a collection of neighborhoods. I really believe the whole city is that, and some great neighborhoods, as you mentioned, from Holston Hills to Fountain City, North Hills, Emerald, Fairmont, Old North, 4th and Gill, in between. The two things I think the city does well is, one is basic services, those livability issues where we make the neighborhoods safe, clean, and a good place to live and recreate and, raise a family, go to school, things like that. The other thing is the city helps us in terms of those big picture issues I talked about earlier, in terms of where we're going to develop, where we're going to grow, where the jobs are going to be, the opportunities, the amenities that make a community livable and great. And traffic, Lauren mentioned, that's a big one in our district. The Broadway corridor is a very tight traffic situation, and so development has to be smart in that area to make the traffic flow. Also, we need to be smarter with how we help the traffic along in terms of signalization and just development, turn lanes, and even new road opportunities perhaps. So we're in a situation where the city needs to maintain the quality of the neighborhood so that it's a great place to live still. But at the same time, we have to figure out how we're going to grow so that we have those opportunities that we need. I would end with just one quick thing, is that the 4th District has a lot of what I'd call challenge areas, opportunities also. The Easttown Mall area, that's the retail center for this side of town, and unfortunately, it's been in decline for a number of years. The Magnolia corridor, on the south side of the district, I think that's the greatest growth opportunity we have, not just business, but also residential and things that serve residents. And so we've got a lot of opportunities in the city, and I look forward to working on those.
Yeah, just a few things that I would add into that in the 4th District area. One of the things that there was a mention of traffic and need for traffic calming, and I would say one of the reasons that we have those issues in the 4th District is because we have a lot of folks who are moving into new developments, even in the county, along the 4th District, but then are commuting to West Knoxville for jobs. So we need to look at economic development in the 4th District. We need to look at access to healthcare in the 4th District. Soon our Genova, the St. Mary's Hospital that was there, will be moving to its new Middlebrook location. So what can we do during this Recode Knoxville, looking at our zoning ordinances to, plan and envision what's going to make our communities healthy in the long run. And in the 4th District, we need not only that access to healthcare, but we need economic centers throughout our district so folks aren't, rushing from one side of town to the other. The other is making sure that as we have, a population, Fountain City, certainly an area, Holston Hills, community members who are aging out of their homes in some way. Their property is too big now, it requires too much maintenance, and so now they're ready to move into a retirement community, but not necessarily ready to leave the 4th District. So this is a great opportunity as we're going through Recode Knoxville to look around, not just in the 4th District, but around the city, and how are we creating opportunities for those public services, job opportunities, healthcare to be accessible in our community so we're not rushing from one side of town to the other constantly.
That's a good point. We do a lot of that rushing, certainly. Harry, I'm going to use this as kind of a bridge. We're going to go from district issues to more citywide issues, and this one involves your district, and then the other portion maybe a little less so. But talking about corridors, you each mentioned the corridors there, particularly Broadway, which is a central part of your district, and then thinking of Magnolia Avenue corridor project specifically, which is just out of your district, I guess, the portion that they've looked at. I'd like to hear, these corridors are so important for the city. I'd like to hear, what do you think the problems are along Broadway and or Magnolia? How do you feel about the Magnolia corridor plan that's been put forth? Let's talk to us about corridors. What are the problems, if there are problems along Broadway specifically, and then maybe look at Magnolia, and what do you think needs to happen?
Each part of town has a corridor or corridors that where the retail and the traffic is to get places, as you said. But Broadway, one thing I would mention, the Food City, there at the old Kmart shopping center, it's not that old. It just shut down. And then go to Western Avenue, the Kroger there shut down. Go over to Magnolia, and the grocery store's never been there, at least not in recent years, in the heart of the community. And so some things, the corridors we need are just very basic, drugstores, grocery stores. In others, it's an amenity, like along Broadway and Central. There are new restaurants opening. There's good things that serve the community, provide jobs and small business opportunities, all of those things. In Magnolia, I think that there's an absence of those small local businesses and restaurants, and I think that what would be right for Broadway and Central, I think they're going to be okay. There's certain targeted things we can do to help those areas along. Magnolia, I think you need a whole plan from downtown to Burlington, or really to Holston Hills. And what we've got to do is, it's one thing to come in and, you think of like Cumberland Avenue a little bit. That's the biggest streetscape we've done, the one on Central Avenue underway. But, crosswalks and, decorative street lamps and street signs and things like that, put some planters and benches out. All that is great, but it's not going to help us on Magnolia to make it pretty. It's also got to work for the community. And so I think that we're going to have to double down our efforts to put viable businesses, bring housing opportunities and amenities and services and medical care, education, the whole gamut, senior services, to service the community and utilize that corridor properly. Magnolia is a beautiful road. It's 5 lanes, sidewalks on both sides. It's a great opportunity. It's level, it's flat, it's several miles long. It's just not developed, and it's not serving the community. And in that sense, it's also not serving the city, because it could contribute more to the tax base and to the economic vitality of the community, jobs included.
I will say, and over the last couple of years, I've been quite outspoken on this issue. I was quite outspoken at the city council meetings last year, particularly in regards to the Magnolia Corridor. And, essentially what the issues that we were raising is exactly what Harry just raised, is that prettying up the area is not going to be enough. And the way that it was being explained to us was that this is the public investment that will attract private investment. However, we've got to make investments that are going to meet the needs of current residents rather than simply attract new residents to the area. And one thing I was happy to see was after we did push back on the city last year, one of the steps that they took was to apply for a Smart Cities grant or Smart Growth grant, or I can't remember what the name of it is, that would pertain to the warehouse district, so that we could have funding to support small-scale manufacturing in that area. And I think that's the direction that the city needs to continue to move into, and that there are also opportunities. I know that funder is quite interested in seeing those funds directly benefit local residents, and so we have to do the work on our end to ensure that project actually does produce jobs that hire locally, that pay good wages, and that we continue to take steps that not only improve the infrastructure along our corridors, but that also work to, not just along that corridor, but throughout our communities, look at ways that we can bring in those amenities so that we have healthy communities around Knoxville.
Well, so when we talk about the corridors, these are how we get to our neighborhoods. They tie us all together, and they tie us to our jobs and our work centers. And there's a couple of different things that are being looked at for those areas when I'll talk about two things. One thing that the city is looking at, and Magnolia is a good place for this because Broadway's a little bit tighter, landlocked-wise. Magnolia is much wider boulevard. As we're looking at, the traffic isn't as heavy on Magnolia, and so the city and the CAT system are looking at pull-offs for the buses to make those sync better with the traffic. And I think Magnolia is a good place to implement that as we look and be able to tie and push public transit along that corridor to tie into those communities. The other thing is when you talk to neighbors out in the Holston Hills area and what they want to see and what they think the problems are along Magnolia, yes, the Magnolia Corridor plan is about infrastructure to bring the private investment, but the Rutledge Pike, how it dumps into Magnolia, or it's where Magnolia and Asheville Pike kind of meet, they feel like that kind of severs that corridor and breaks up the feeling of a local shopping area because it brings this traffic in at high speed and only goes one way. And we have a similar problem on Broadway where Hall of Fame dumps out. And so we're having all these conversations about smart growth and walkability and creating areas where the millennials and the baby boomers can walk around and go to, pick up their medications or grab their bag of groceries or grab lunch at a sandwich shop. But then we have these mega roads that don't work with that model that dump in and sever those districts so that people in wheelchairs and people with baby strollers can't get across safely. So those are things that I think need to be looked at and I think that are disrupting our corridors. And they're right now in this year's city budget, they're looking at how Hall of Fame comes in there and what changes could be made. And that would be something moving forward to collaborate with TDOT to address that. And so those are other things that the government can do that are appropriate to be able to solve those kind of problems so that we can actually make these shopping areas and centers that tie us together. And the other thing I'll say is when you look back historically, these corridors were filled with, and some of them still exist along these different corridors, where you had commercial below and residential above. And we actually in the 50s, 60s made that illegal in our code. And so we have these pre-existing structures that we're telling people they have to pay extra dollars and go to extra meetings to be able to use those as they're built. But that's the model we're moving back towards, making these walkable communities, and that helps us increase the density to be able to get people on the buses, and it gives other places for people to live. So those are the things that I want to see moving forward on the corridors, and that's how we make it a good segue to the neighborhoods that are beyond those.
It's interesting. Some of the things that we're talking about are we're sort of trying to undo some of our past sins. I mean, you talk about Hall of Fame.
Some of them are 8 to 10 years old.
That's not that old.
It's not that old.
Talk about development in some of these areas, and there are historical reasons that some in some cases action by our city government that caused decline in one area,
and now we're paying for those sins and have to figure out how to undo it.
Sort of the sins of the fathers kind of
Absolutely.
concept there being visited. Just to take it away a minute from my direction, if you all would talk about just what you would prioritize. I mean, there are a couple of things that this is what we've got to get right immediately as soon as I get on city council. What would those couple of issues be that you just think is so critical citywide? And I am totally lost with who answered first last time. Who answered first last
Harry
time?
did.
So that means it's your turn again. So critical issues, just like those big, we got to do this right now.
Well, I would say Recode Knoxville is so important. It's important that we get a wide, selection of our community involved, everyone if possible, but that's not going to happen. So as much participation as possible. And so it's it's our responsibility to get that right. It's not about why aren't people engaging? Why aren't people coming out? That's for us to figure out. How do we make it more accessible? Is the language understandable? We can't just talk about setbacks and, all of these things and expect people to just jump in from their everyday lives and be able to switch over to this lingo that they might not be used to understanding. This is what I do a lot in my nonprofit work and working with communities, is you have to take a whole vocabulary and just make it accessible to people. And our city government has to put that work in and then create the spaces where people can engage in conversation. So far some of the meetings that I've been to have been, especially the last one was an extensive presentation. And then any kind of questions were left to the end where you can go over into a corner somewhere and talk to somebody at a table. But when we don't have those open discussions where neighbors can learn from each other and hear what other people have questions about and learn when they hear an answer to that question, that improves our public engagement process. And we're going to need buy-in from the community to make this work. We don't want to see a lot of resistance and pushback over the next 10 years as Knoxville adjusts to a new set of zoning codes. So if we can get it right from the outset with really meaningful input from our public.
Okay. Laura?
I do think that's one of the most important things that's going to be facing this new council, because number one, it's in progress, and the new council will be jumping in kind of mid-process, unfortunately. I think the original idea was that it was going to take 20 months and it was going to be done before this council turned off. And from the get-go, I was like, yeah, no. Whenever you assume something's going to be that timeline, it never works out. So by default, or by Murphy's Law, it's going to be 24 months at least, and we're in the midpoint of it. And this is the first time we've tried this in 50 to 60 years, so it's really important that we get it right. It's also maybe really important that we don't always wait that long to revise things and Band-Aid patch the way we have over the years. And by that I mean people have been able to make changes and adapt to modern life through variances that you have to pay for and spend time going to meetings. And so it adds cost to projects, it delays projects, it leads people to abandon projects. That would be good for the local economy and bring jobs in. So the Recode project it's going to dictate a little bit about how, in mostly our commercial areas, how housing goes forward, how commercial development, what kind of uses are going to end up in the buildings. But moving forward, yes, the past meetings over the past few months have been only being lectured to and then little opportunity for public dialogue. So there's been some pushback for that. So I believe the meetings that are going to pick up, maybe not until January, are going to be changing format because that request has been made from several sources, as well as the moving forward, the Recode. It's going to have a lot more visual pictures to go with it because our code is very, if you look at it right now, very few pictures and very few illustrations that actually make it comprehensible to the person who's not a planner working at MPC, which, most people aren't. And so and the other thing too is we need to fix just simple things. Like we have things in the code that are never enforced, like fencing on corner lots is one of the biggest violations you might see in the code. And so I've talked to the building inspector and the codes enforcement about you can't spot enforce this on people because we're not enforcing it on 90%. So we need to look at how that's in there. So there's nuanced things, but again, we haven't looked at this in 50 years, so it's very important, and it's going to dictate how our economy and what jobs we can attract into certain areas and the housing that develops from there too.
The City Council, will deal with any number of issues. Some we probably don't even foresee at this point, but if I'm elected to serve the people of Knoxville, I have two things that I talk about in the campaign really everywhere I go, and one is kind of a big picture issue, and the other is a more programmatic. The big picture issue is that economic growth is so important, and it's really understated how, Knoxville is not just important to Knoxville, it's important to Knox County, the region, and the state. The four big cities in Sevier County are the lion's share of the state's revenue growth. And what we do here in Knoxville not only affects us, but it affects those services that the county, like the school system and the state, provide. So it's important that we learn how to grow in Knoxville, do it in a smart way so that it's not burdensome to the community, but that we grow better than we're doing now. Right now, our tax base is not growing to the extent that we need it to, and a big component of that tax base is our residential property. And so when I talk about growth, I don't it's not just along the corridors as we discussed previously, it's also residential, and that could be in all strata of income. It's we need affordable housing, but we need the city of Knoxville. Cities are supposed to grow, and as long as they grow in an orderly and purposeful way, then it can be a real boon to the citizens and to the region. The second, more specific issue I talk about a lot is our police force. In terms of dollars, it's the number one item in the budget. It's also the number one item in terms of headcount of city employees. So it's an important service. It's one certainly the citizens value. But we're in a situation where we have been declining for a lot of reasons, possibly internal and external. And our staff levels on the street are not what they were in the past. And the city, crime hasn't necessarily gone down. In fact, some people would say it's going up. The needs for the citizens to interface with their police department haven't diminished. And so what we're doing right now is we're training people. We're spending a lot of money with an excellent training program, and we're training police officers, and they leave in a short order many times to go to other agencies and jurisdictions at a sometimes higher pay. The weakness of that for us is that we end up filling in our manpower with overtime. Overtime is very inefficient financially, and it can also have detrimental effects on the officers in terms of fatigue and mistakes and judgment and things like that. And so overtime is good in specific situations in the proper dosage, but when we are paying overtime, we're basically spending money for 3 officers to get 2 on the street. And so that's a budgetary hole that simply won't work out, and we need to take a close look at why that is happening and what we can do to rectify the situation.
All right. I cannot believe it, but the time is almost done. So I'm going to give you each 30 seconds. 30 seconds to tell people one final time why they should vote for you. So Lauren, you're up next, I believe.
I
So
get
Lauren,
to go first.
you have 30 seconds. I'm going to cut you off if you go too long. Go.
Hi, I'm Lauren Rider. I ask for your vote coming up here on November 7th. I would love to be the representative so we can have a voice on council. That as we go forward and we grow, I think it's important that the voters have a voice on council as the changes happen. I've been very involved locally, working with businesses and neighborhoods to deal with some of the vacant properties and get growth coming forward that brings jobs and housing for everyone, as well as the transportation issues. And I feel like all of this growth will tie forward and make us a successful city to be able to fund those critical services that we all rely on from our city, from our trash to our fire. So I ask for your vote, and based on my experience and the energy I'm going to bring to the position.
Thank you. And that was close. It was close. Harry, as close as you can to 30 seconds.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to allow us to speak to the voters, and I also would appreciate the support of the voters and hope that they'll go out in this last week of early voting and get those numbers up. In the primary, we collectively, we raised the participation in this election by 2 to 3 times from what it was in the past, but it's still low relative numbers. And so I hope that we'll get a really strong turnout here and into Election Day. What I want to do is use my experience in the community, my vision, to work with the community, all aspects of the community, to tackle those problems that are holding us back or that are opportunities to take us forward. And I look forward to that opportunity. Thank you.
Good deal. Amelia.
Okay, thank you, Alan, for giving us this time. And I'm going to use my couple of seconds just to explain
At 30.
30 seconds to explain the write-in process, because I'm Amelia Parker and I'm a write-in candidate for District 4 using the little dial pad, and you have to include at least Parker when you vote. So I hope that you all will come out and vote for me. You know, I'm supported by the 2017 City Council Amendment because we feel like we need accountable leadership on City Council who will promote people-centered policies. I'm proud of what my campaign has done so far with shifting the dialogue back to Knoxville residents and less about our buildings and structures. But we need to make sure community members' needs are met in our community. So I hope you will come out and write me in for District 4, Amelia Parker. Thanks so much.
Thank you all. You did a really good job of trying to keep it to that 30 seconds, and I appreciate it. It's hard. All right, we're going to take a break now, and I'll be right back and talk about the upcoming week in downtown Knoxville. Stay with us.